Good morning, everyone. Have you ever been somewhere at some point in your life and thought, I hope no one sees me here in this place and in this moment? Yeah, me too. Let me tell you about one of those moments I had, and it was quite a few years ago. It was before I was married to Tim and when I was single. That's important to the story. And there was a friend of mine who was having quite a rough time. And she said to me one day, will you come to a pharmacy with me? I need to get some of that medication that you need the morning after a night that maybe didn't go to plan. And I said, yeah, sure, I can come with you, that's fine. And she was really nervous and she didn't want to ask at the counter. So I said, don't worry, I'll come with you and I'll ask at the counter for you. Now in my head, I thought, you know what, that's no big deal. I'm just helping out a friend when she needed it. But what happens is the pharmacist walks out and it's someone that I know. And not just someone that I know, it's a Christian who goes to another church locally. And I think, oh no, she's going to think this medication is for me. Not only is she going to think that, she's going to jump to all sorts of conclusions as to why I need said medication. And I had got so caught up in all of these feelings of just panic that I had to stop myself and remind myself that my friend that I was with here was feeling judged. She was feeling ashamed and she was scared. And I had no right to worry about my own feelings and what someone might think of me in that. And that moment has stuck with me because honestly, I think we've all felt that tension at some point, worrying more about the appearances of what we're doing or what other people might say or think, rather than doing the right thing. Maybe for you it wasn't a pharmacy. Maybe it was helping someone who others thought, you know what, they're not your sort of people. Maybe it's making a tough decision and your friends just didn't get it or understand. Or maybe it's simply about showing kindness when it would have been far easier to walk away from. That day reminded me something that's core to what Jesus taught as well. That loving people often means stepping into uncomfortable spaces. And we're in this series, Who Do You Think You Are? And we've been looking at our identity and where our identity comes from. And some of that comes from culture and the environments around us. It can come from what other people say and think about us. And for me, that's a huge weakness on my part, is I put too much value on what other people might think. But actually, Jesus says something different. And this morning, as we kind of explore that again in this series, there's a truth that I want us to explore today, and it's this. When you know who you are, you'll know what to do. When you know who you are, you'll know what to do. Now, here's something that might surprise you. If you've decided to follow Jesus, you're not meant to just blend in with everyone else. Jesus said something pretty incredible and quite challenging. He said, you're the salt for the whole world, and you're like light for everyone around you. So if you struggle with your identity and you're asking God or Jesus, who am I? Jesus may well answer with these two words. He already did. He said, you are salt and you are light. Now, that might be a little bit odd, especially if you're hearing that for the first time. Like salt, like the salt you put on your chips. And light. I mean, what does that actually mean? Jesus put it this way. He said, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its flavour, what good is it? It's useless. You might as well throw it out. Now, back in Jesus' time, salt was a real precious and valuable thing. Probably second most important to actual light. People often traded and were paid in salt. And it's actually where we get the phrase, worth his salt. See, when Jesus calls us salt and asks us to be salt, he wasn't just saying, you're a nice, down-to-earth kind of guy. He was saying, you know, you're someone who's been completely changed by God, and now you have the power, by being salt, to change things around you. Just come with me for a minute as we think about what salt actually does. Now, salt preserves things. Before we had fridges, salt is how they kept food from going bad as long as possible. Salt stops the decay process and makes things last. And I think in the same way, in Jesus calling us salt, he's asking us that we can, or challenging us, that we can preserve what's good in people's lives. When people are maybe going through a rough patch, when everything feels like it's falling apart. Our very presence and our encouragement can help bring stability and preserve the hope in those dark moments. Maybe you'll help someone find something that lasts, something that has real meaning and real purpose. Salt also purifies. Salt has this natural antibacterial property. It kills germs and cleans things up. Now, we live in a world that is pretty messed up. You only need to have seen the news this last week or two to know that our world is full of corruption. It's full of mess, full of selfishness. And you can represent something in the midst of all of that that is clean and that is good. Not in a holier than thou, I'm better than you kind of way, but in a way that shows there's a better way to live our life. Your integrity in a dishonest workplace, your faithfulness in your relationships, that is salt when it's put into practice. Salt also makes you thirsty. I don't know if you've ever wondered, you've been in a pub and they give you some free nuts. I mean, it's a great business strategy because we all know nuts are salty and it makes you thirsty and therefore you'll buy more drinks. But salt makes people thirsty. And so when we're salt, when we maybe live our life differently, when we are generous instead of greedy, when we're loving instead of maybe harsh, people might question that. They get curious. They say, why aren't you stressed about that? How come you're coping with that in such a different way to me? Your life has an opportunity to create a thirst in others for what you have. Salt also melts. Salt melts ice. Have you ever thrown salt on an icy path? And no matter how deep that ice is, salt will penetrate through that. And some people have hearts that are maybe like ice. We say hearts that are frozen, don't we? Maybe people have been hurt so many times. They get cynical and they get bitter. And the sort of salt that you can offer people can break down that. They can melt those frozen hearts. And then the last property of salt I just want us to touch on briefly is that salt heals. If you jump into an ocean with a cut on you, you will know that sometimes that stings, but the salt water actually helps that cut heal faster. It speeds up the healing process. And Jesus calls you and I to be part of a healing process for people. When people have been hurt by others, when there's a lack of forgiveness, we have a chance to go in there and to help heal old wounds. Just our acceptance of people can help heal shame and will heal hearts. See, salt is an incredible commodity, and therefore it's quite an incredible thing for us to be compared to by Jesus when he says, you are salt. Jesus also said, you are the light of the world. A city on a hill can't be hidden. Nobody lights a lamp just to cover it with a bowl. You put it where everyone can see it. Now, here's the thing about light. You don't have to force it. You don't have to stand there and be like, I'm going to try and be light. It just happens. It's different than when it gets dark at home. You, at some point, have to get up from your seat and you have to go flick a switch, don't you, to put the light on. If you're fancy, maybe you've got an app that does it for you. But that isn't the sort of light Jesus is talking about. He's talking about a light that comes naturally when we're living and following him. I want to tell you about two guys who knew this. Two guys from way back. They're called Paul and Silas. And Paul and Silas, they were traveling around telling people about Jesus and how Jesus could change people's lives. And it was pretty revolutionary stuff at the time. And what was happening is what Paul and Silas were saying was making the powerful people around pretty nervous. Paul and Silas arrived in a city called Philippi. And Paul helped free a young woman from being exploited. She had some kind of spiritual gift where she was able to tell people's fortunes, kind of like the mystic Meg of the day. And Paul freed her from this. But her owners weren't happy because she was their cash cow. And so they kicked off. Can someone just pass me my water bottle? Is that right? Thank you. They kicked off and they went to the authorities. And the authorities were like, do you know what? This is not okay. They're causing disruption. They're messing with business. And they said, we're going to make an example out of them. So the crowd, they got whipped up into a frenzy. And the authorities said, you know what we're going to do with them is we're going to teach these two a lesson. So they publicly stripped Paul and Silas naked. Then they beat them with rods. And if that wasn't enough, they then whipped them 39 times with a whip that had pieces of metal and bone in it, designed to literally tear their back open and reveal their flesh and go into the internal organs. After that brutal beating, they were then thrown into prison. And at that point, their feet would have been fastened into stocks. Now, not stocks that were loose that just kept them there, but stocks that would have pulled their legs so tightly that it was its own form of torture in itself. So just picture that. They're naked, they're bloodied and bruised and hurt. They're in absolute agony. And they're probably thinking, this is the place we're going to die tonight. So what does the Bible tell us they were doing? Well, at midnight that night, instead of cursing their luck or maybe planning revenge or just feeling sorry for themselves, the Bible says they were praying and they were singing songs to God. And the other prisoners were listening to them. Now, it blows my mind that two people in that state would do that. But also, they didn't have an emergency strategy meeting thinking, okay, look, we're followers of Jesus. People are watching us. What are we going to do? They just did it because it's who they had become. Even in their worst moment, their faith was real. It was so, so deep that worship was their natural response. And here's the moment, though, at this time when things take a dramatic turn. Because just as they're worshipping, something completely unexpected happens. Something that only God can orchestrate. There's an earthquake. And the prison doors fly open, and the prisoners are all free, including Paul and Silas. And the jailer wakes up and panics because it was the jailer's job to obviously keep them secure in there. And he thinks, do you know what, my life is now going to be on the line, so I'm going to take matters into my own hands and end my life before that happens. And at that moment, Paul shouts, no, don't. We're still here. We haven't left. Just think about that. If it was you and I and God had broken us out of a prison in a crazy way like that, I would be running for the hills. But they stayed. They cared so much about this guy, the jailer, who'd locked them up and tortured them, that they stayed. That's what real light does. It doesn't run from dark situations. It stays in them and shines brightly. You know what? I want us to talk about something that maybe a lot of us carry with us, but we rarely say out loud. We often have, I think, a deep down feeling that maybe we're not doing enough. You know, we can hear stories from the Bible of Paul and Silas and others, and they live remarkable lives of faith. Maybe we see other people around us and we think they're just achieving so much more than me. Maybe you're doing a good job. Maybe you're raising kids, you're studying hard. Perhaps you're caring for a family member, but it still doesn't feel significant enough. You scroll through social media and you see people starting businesses or writing books, traveling the world, starting movements, and you think, I'm just ordinary. I don't really do anything that special. And perhaps you even question, is this all I was meant for? Let me remind you of something, though. Jesus didn't say, you are the CEO of the earth, or you're the social media star of the world. He said, you are salt and you are light. And that means something revolutionary. Salt isn't glamorous, but it's vital. Light doesn't make a scene, it just shows up. And it might be hard to believe, but maybe you don't need to change the whole world to live a life that matters. Maybe you don't have to have a big platform to shout from. Maybe you don't have to have a fancy job or some wild success story. Maybe your greatest impact is found in your faithfulness, in being exactly who you were made to be, where you are, showing love to all of those around you. Maybe it looks like showing up for your family day after day, even when no one thanks you. Maybe it looks like saying yes to caring for a sick parent or friend, even when it's exhausting and it's invisible work. Maybe it's sending a text to encourage someone to keep going, or listening patiently to someone who just needs to be heard. None of that looks impressive, but it's powerful stuff. It's sacred. It's being salt and it's being light. And here's the tension. You might never see the results of that. You might never get the recognition that you think you might deserve. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. In fact, I think some of the most important things God may have for each of us is the unnoticed and the deeply ordinary stuff. See, salt, when we put it into something, it disappears into the meal, doesn't it? You don't see it, but without it, everything is bland. Light doesn't fight the dark, it just shows up and the darkness has to go. So if you've ever felt like your life or your work, your choices are not enough, let this today be your permission to just breathe. You don't need to strive to impress. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You are salt and you are light. And God, I think, is delighting in the ordinary faithfulness of our lives because he can use that in extraordinary ways. Now, if you want to call yourself a follower of Jesus here this morning, and maybe you're just exploring what all this church stuff and God stuff is about, you get let off this morning because you're not asked to be salt and light. But as we're talking about this, you might be sitting there thinking, I wonder if that's my experience of Christians or people of faith. Is this what I've experienced of them? And that question makes me feel nervous because you have to ask it of myself and think, is that the experience people have had of me? Do they see me being salt and light in those places? You know, as followers of Jesus, we don't always get it right. And Jesus sets a pretty high standard for us to follow. But that's what we're to aspire to. Being salt and light isn't about being churchy. It's not about knowing the answers to everything or acting perfect. It's about showing love. It's about standing by people when they're struggling. It's about being real. We don't have to be loud about it. In fact, sometimes it works best when we just quietly live this out with integrity over time. Let me give you an example of something that happened in my life quite a few years ago where I saw this salt and light thing really play out. Now, I think I might have shared this from stage here before. But when I was 16, I moved to Suffolk and went to sixth form at Northgate in Ipswich. And so I started there not knowing a single person. And very soon I met two friends, one of which was part of a big group of friends that I got in with. And this group, they loved drinking and clubbing and going out, and I was a part of that. And once you're in that, it was quite hard to get out of. So that was one group of friends that I made. But I also met another friend, a girl called Angela, and she was in my form at sixth form, and she was a Christian. Now, I had grown up in church my whole life. I'd made a commitment to God at the age of 7. But I wasn't an Angela sort of Christian. Now, an Angela sort of Christian, she was out there. Like, she told everyone she met about Jesus. Everything in her life was spiritual. She was kind of crazy, in a nice way crazy, and it was attractive to be around. And it was because of what I saw in her that really pushed and developed my faith and my journey. As Andrew and I continued at sixth form, we started talking about what would it look like for other people at our school to find and follow Jesus. And so Angela and I decided we're going to start praying. And so we would pray before school and at lunch for 5 minutes every single day. And we would just pray for our school community and pray that people would come to know God. We did that for a little while, and then we decided, you know what, we need to actually show people what we're about. So we decided we were going to do some nice things for people in our school. So we'd put snacks in the common room, and we'd help people, and we'd just be smiling when we saw people. We were the weirdo Christians around sixth form. But Angela and I, over time, had this vision of, like, what would it look like to see 100 Christians gathering each week in our school? So we had like these small groups that we called cell groups at the time that met in our schools. And I think we had a handful of people that would come to that, and we'd maybe have a Bible study, or we'd have a visitor come in. But we said, what would it look like to have 100 people attending that? Well, very soon after this, within a matter of weeks, that happened. We had over 120 young people come to our groups every single week. And we had to find a new location, we had to split groups, then we had to split again, and it was crazy. We saw some, like, mental stuff happen. Like, we saw a Satanist completely give his life to God one lunchtime at school. We saw another guy who became a good friend of mine, who was an atheist, again, completely turn his back on everything he believed to follow Jesus. He went on to study theology at university and then went on to lead a church. And even my first friend that I met, who was the heavy drinker and the clubber, she came as well, and she became a Christian as well. Being salt and light, what I saw in Angela, to start with, changed everything. When Paul and Silas showed love to that jailer, something incredible happened. The jailer fell down in front of them and said, "I've seen something in you that I want." He said, "What do I need to do to be saved?" I want what you have. And that was mine and Angela's experience at sixth form. This jailer had seen Paul and Silas worship when they should have been complaining. And they said to him, put your trust in Jesus and you'll be completely changed. Now, what's amazing about that story is many people, many theologians, and if you study the Bible, believe that it was probably that incident that then caused a church to start growing and spread in that city. Two people shared their story with salt and light to the jailer, and it launched a whole church. That's why you matter so much. You're not just someone who believes good things and tries to live a good life. You're a change agent. You're an undercover influencer. And sometimes we work behind the scenes, and sometimes you'll shine boldly, but God has created you to make a real difference. So if you're feeling today that your life doesn't matter, please hear that you are mistaken. You are salt and you are light. Your life matters more than you know. So what would it look like? What would it look like in your workplace? Many of us spend so much time in our workplace. Now, being salt and light at work isn't about preaching to your co-worker or leaving nice Bible verses on their desk. Maybe it's simply being the person who speaks with honesty when everyone is gossiping around you. Maybe it's being generous with encouragement, even when the atmosphere might be competitive. Maybe it's offering to help someone who's struggling with their own workload, or showing grace to someone who's messed up. Maybe it's cleaning out the office fridge, even though it's not in your job description and it's way below your pay grade. Being salt and light at work means bringing a spirit of peace and excellence and love into that daily grind, day in, day out. Being salt and light means choosing kindness when it would be easier to ignore someone. Maybe it's buying lunch for a co-worker who's having a tough time. It could be as simply as going in tomorrow and saying to someone, how are you really doing? And actually listening for the answer and taking time to hear them. It's choosing love even when it's inconvenient, even if other people are watching or not. Choosing grace even when people don't deserve it. That's salt and that is light. Now, when Jesus called his followers salt and light, he didn't compare them to something flashy and strong and mighty. He didn't say you're the sword of the earth or the thunder of the world. He chose two things that are subtle but transformative. See, salt works quietly, but it changes everything it touches. Now, you rarely see salt, I've already said that, when it's added. And if you've ever made bread and you've forgotten to add the salt, you know about it. You know when it's missing. In the same way, if we're going to be people of love and integrity and peace, you might not get any attention, you might not grab any headlines, but your presence can change the flavour of a room. It can change the flavour of a conversation. It influences from within. So are you willing to make a difference, even when no one's applauding you, even when it goes unseen? And then there's light. Light doesn't fight the darkness, it just shows up. You know, darkness isn't actually a thing, is it? It's just the absence of light. And as soon as light appears, darkness flees. Light doesn't need to shout, it simply just is. And that's enough to change an atmosphere. So you don't need to argue people into faith. We just have to show up, to be loved, to be present, to be consistent. Just imagine for a second what that would look like if everyone who said they were followers of Jesus took this task to hand of being salt and light. Imagine workplaces where people actually looked out for each other, where kindness was the normal and gossip didn't happen. Imagine streets where people knew their neighbours and helped each other out, and no one felt invisible or lonely. Imagine families where apologies came quickly and love comes first. What about our schools? What if schools were full of encouragement instead of pressure? What if loneliness doesn't get the last word because someone always shows up for us? What if our villages and our towns were full of people who chose compassion instead of cynicism? Not because they had to, but because that's just who we were. Now, it wouldn't be flashy, probably wouldn't go viral, but it would change things. Slowly, quietly, beautifully even. Because when people live like that, the world can't stay the same. And this is what happens when you and I, ordinary people living ordinary lives, decide to be salt and light. Let me pray. Father, thank you. Thank you that you chose us and you have loved us. And yeah, Lord, that you want something greater for us. Father, thank you that you gave us these words of being salt and light. And no matter where else our identity comes from, what other voices we hear, Lord, they're the things that you say we're to be. So, Father, as we take these words and we go from this place, Lord, I pray that you would help us put that into action, no matter what that might look like for each of us. Help us to be salt, where we bring flavour to the situations we're in, every situation that we're in. And help us to be light, where actually the darkness isn't welcome there when we're around. And God, as a result of that, Lord, I pray that people will notice. They'll see something different in us because we follow you. And because we believe that we can change the environments around us with your help. Amen.